who do you think I should ask next? Who do you want
Oh,
me to?
right. So I think I'd like to bring in my very first coach, Mike Edwards.
Okay, so
Um,
definitely.
he yeah. So
Tell
Mike
me a
Edwards.
little bit about Mike.
Yeah, so Mike Edwards, he's an agile coach. So he was originally an agile coach. So he's like a leadership executive coach now. And But I've been watching him. He coached me, so he's like one of these guys that I've been watching his footsteps and seeing how he keeps on stepping into a more impactful self, right?
Hmm.
And what I like about Mike is he's stepping into the executive suites, right? So now he's working with a large bank in Toronto, and so he's got all of his tools, right, that he brings with him. So he brings in tools of executive leadership coaching, but agile coaching, agile power teams. Like he's been in that space, he's done that, and he's doing that. And he's just for me. He just shows up big, right? And the part that he has, I'll talk about the responsibility process, and I don't know if you know Christopher Avery
Hmm.
and the responsibility process. So he is also really big on the responsibility process itself, and he lives by example in that specific space. So I just think for him, like for me, when we talk about alter egos and we talk about making that big impact, he really knows. Like he just and he challenges the heck out of me, to grow that much more. So this is like I always think everyone needs a Mike Edwards in their life, like a
Wow.
coach
Okay.
like that in your life. But
That
like,
that's a very nice introduction to him.
yeah, yeah, okay. That's maybe I'll stop it at that. But there's a lot more that's in there. But I think that we need that in order to be big, to be bold, to be brave. We need to be able to step in, and he can provoke that, right? He can actually make that happen. Like he with you as well, but he can help engage that, right? So he's just awesome. So but he's
Good.
also in our space in all these different regards. So I think he's really relatable to us as coaches, right? Or in the agile space.
Great. I hope he will accept this opportunity. So, hi. This week's interview is with Mike Edwards. We talked about collaborating with family members, the difference between trust and psychological safety, how work-life balance is really a scarcity concept, and last but not least, and perfect for the holiday season, how nobody at work ever gave him a problem for disappearing for 2 weeks. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Welcome everyone, and welcome Mike.
Thank you. This is exciting.
It's exciting for me as well. And so just for people to know it a little bit, I'm here in Belgium, and it's about 10 minutes after 10 o'clock in the evening. What's it time is it on your side?
It's 10 minutes after 4 p.m. and I'm in Kitchener, Ontario in Canada.
And let's indeed look a little bit at that. So this is my house. Well, the strange thing is this is that blue little dot is where my house is, although it's not on the camera. It's Google hasn't found it. Let's put it that way. And let's move to your place. Let's ask Google to go and always not to go to the exact location, but you're, like you just said, in Canada on the complete other side of the world,
Yeah,
with a 7 hour distance. So
absolutely. 7 hour distance, but there's a lot of connection to Belgium, but like you're part of the world there, because Kitchener, I don't know if you know this, Kitchener, pardon me, back around World War I, they renamed the city from Berlin to Kitchener because there's such a strong German community here. So a lot of ties to your part of the world. In fact, we have the second biggest Oktoberfest in the world.
Wow. Okay. Well, Belgium and Germany is not completely the same, but I see a lot of Waterloo around you. Waterloo International Airport, University of Waterloo, which is also linked to yeah, to our part of the world. And I think I have some family in Ontario, which is not that far from you either, if I remember correctly. So yeah. That's okay.
Awesome.
Let's bring us back on screen and let's remove Google. Voila. And I'll turn it off on my side because it usually takes a lot of resources. Google it. Okay. And that should be a lot better now. Yeah. So that's we've already jumped into it, but people don't know yet who is Mike. So tell us a little bit more. Who is Mike?
Yeah. The place I like to start is talk about what fascinates me, because what's fascinating me right now is there's a lot of things. Like for example, is leadership a thing? Is team a thing? Like, what is trust? Can we actually create trust? Like, there's so many things that are fascinating me, and they're bubbling up in all kinds of weird and different ways, which is really cool. But what I do is I work with teams, whether it's at an executive level or, at the grassroots team kind of level. I do everything from agile coaching to leadership coaching. And a big part of what I do is the responsibility process from Christopher Avery. I bring a lot of that into my practice as well. So there's a lot of things that's really, quite a plaid kind of picture of what is that I do.
The responsibility process of Christopher from more or less this book, but of course from a lot more than Christopher.
You got it. Yeah. You got it. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because we're recording this on Wednesday, 15th of June, and next Friday. So of course we'll air this a lot later. But next Friday on the 17th of June, the video for Christopher Avery is going live. So it's interesting that we're recording it and that we're starting talking about Christopher. So yeah. Yeah, coincidence. Well,
yeah, total coincidence, and maybe not. Who knows?
Well, I did know that you would talk, or that you were interested in his book, but I didn't know that you talked a lot and used it a lot. But I think a lot of us we when we work, especially when we work at trust level with teams. Yeah, there is, like we say in that video, there is an I in team about the taking responsibility. So that is very clear. Okay, I want to jump into that first question. That is, what is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
I was thinking about this question, and the thing that really jumped out to me is for a large part of my life, I played music. I started way back in grade school. And let's fast forward, because I think that's where the more interesting parts of it are, is about 30 some odd years ago, I joined a band called the Ceremonial Band of the Waterloo Regional Police. So it's a community band, by definition, falls under the police banner. And we did a lot of marching type performances and, some concert type things. And there's two reasons I bring this up. One is the community aspect of it. And because of that community, I actually met my wife there.
Oh.
Yeah, she was.
But that's a huge influence, I assume.
Huge influence. She's a big part of why I am who I am. And we are been married for 34 years. make sure I get the right number here.
It's on tape. It's on tape. Whatever
Yeah,
she sees it.
I know. And if I'm wrong, she'll correct me. It's all good. um, but it's important to me because it created a connection. It created, um, um, a connection that goes deeper than just your normal community, like the band being a community. It created a connection that went deeper for me. And it didn't create a problem inside of the band. In fact, we're the only surviving band romance.
So she was part of the band as well. So because that wasn't clear for me in the start. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
definitely.
But when I started in the band, I was really young. I was 18 when I started in the band, and she sat 2 seats over from me. She played clarinet at the time. I played bassoon, and there was always some kind of connection there, even though
There
she
was
was.
someone sitting in between you, so there was still.
Exactly, and yet we made that connection. And the cool part is we went on to actually create another band member.
Oh,
Our oldest son is now one. It might the exact title might change, but he's one of our color party commanders. Right, so the people in front with the rifles and the flags and such, he's one of the commanders of that now.
wow! So that it starts. It's not just a family thing because of course there were other people in the band, but yeah, that's definitely it's nice because I like to. Well, I've know a few people and I've done myself. I like to work with my children. I've created a workshop with my father, and that had a huge influence on me. And so it's nice to see when people try to do something similar with their children because you kind of understand things at a different level.
Yes,
um,
I
I
agree.
know that when I was a child, I went with my father to his work, but that usually was he was off in meetings or programming or whatever, and I was just sitting behind the computer playing a game or I don't know reading whatever. So not really understanding, but doing something similar creates a different kind of connection.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
that's
I
definitely.
would totally agree. Because our band, um, we'll see what post COVID brings, but our band would do like floor shows. So we're doing marching and playing, and it's all synchronized and together, and it's a very different thing, and we're all a part of the team. And
But you all depend on each other, I assume, because if I think about teamwork in Agile, it's like, okay, you need to have some way to work together.
I
And
agree.
in a band, that's even more important. And while you're performing, you need some kind of way to signal to each other, okay, now we're changing tone, we're doing
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah, which kind of brings me to the second part of it, which is in the last, I think, 15 years of being in the band, I've been in the drum line.
Mhm.
So on the street, like some of the more famous drum lines would be like Top Secret, or I know in the Royal military band, they have a really sharp drum line too. We're a lot smaller, but the same kind of thing where really um the thing that came out of it is working together, right, without talking to each other. And the drum I played the most often while marching was the bass drum. And you're pointing right to the point where like signals came from the bass drum. And so I had to pay attention to what was happening around me, and there are things we knew, right? If this person does this, I do that, right? But my son, as guard commander, he's the first guy on the street, right? He's ahead of everybody. He can't see me. He can't see anybody. And what he's counting on is hearing a signal coming from me. So I got to pay
Oh,
attention to stuff and signal him, and then he'll start moving, and then of course, the rest of us can start moving, and so on and so forth.
So it's all about, yeah. Well, I would say rules, but rules is the wrong thing. It's about some yeah, some kind of ways to signal and to talk to each other without talking. So different. It
Exactly.
reminds me of I talked about yesterday. I was at the conference and we talked about no, not agile, XP 2000. I don't know, 10 or something, or 9. I think it was in Stockholm, and we saw, I think it was a jazz band or something like that. And it was kind of similar. There's a 3 or a 4 piece on stage, and they didn't talk to each other. They just looked at each other, and I was in the audience very close. I couldn't see any signaling, and they would just start at the same beat without, I don't know, they were waiting for 1 minute, and then all of a sudden all started to play together. And it was amazing because I couldn't see their signaling, and of course there probably was, or they felt something similar. They did all kinds of changes in harmonics, changing in tone, changing in rhythm and whatever. And just couldn't see what they did. But yeah, of course, if you're so many years playing together, you just kind of feel, and you, like you say, there's probably some hidden signals, that like magicians. It feels like
Yeah,
magicians, but it's, well, I wouldn't call it a trick, but there is some guidelines around how it works. It's
there
really
is.
nice.
There is. But I like what you're saying. Like, there is an intuitive part to it too. And I think in the agile world that exists too. We just don't pay attention to it as much as we could. But there's times where intuitively I know the band needs something. They need me to create just nothing fancy, just a good solid beat to make sure they're they have something to all rally around. Or I just know my son needs me to actually repeat a command, like a signal, right?
Like when you walk into a development team and you walk in and you just know something's wrong without anybody telling you. It's something
Absolutely.
similar, right? Yeah, I
Absolutely.
recognize that.
Yeah. And sometimes it comes because I'm also paying attention to the environment around, and it's very noisy. Sometimes there's other bands within earshot, and I know that could create confusion within our band.
Yeah, of course, especially because your son is further away and he doesn't hear everything like you're hearing, and he might be hearing that other band maybe even more closely.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of
Yeah.
risk there as well. Oh, that's
What
interesting.
what you just made me think of is my son's the first one. My wife is the last one. She's in the
Ah,
very last row. So they've always been my it's a feedback mechanism for me, right? Like, what happened there? We didn't hear anything, or oh, thank you for doing that, or so on and so forth.
so you debrief or do kind of retrospective at the end? Is that what I'm hearing, or is that?
It's often very informal,
Yeah, I can
right? As
imagine.
opposed to some kind of formal thing. Certainly, later, once we're back, in the practice hall and such, we might spend some time talking about it more broadly, but generally it's in smaller pockets. But definitely, it's like, what happened there? How can we improve that? What can we do better? Right? And that's where some changes came from. Shocking, right?
Yeah, yeah. I have some. Well, I see them less often, but I had when I was younger. I had some. Well, I have friends who are professional musicians that I followed along for quite a while, a summer or two. That I really saw a lot of concerts, and it was really interesting to hear some of the debriefing in the backstage. And like you say, some days there's like nothing to discuss, and sometimes it's like, what the hell happened there? And then yeah, and that song, and why did you, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm not going to spoil some of their secrets, but yeah,
yeah,
that's how you get better, especially if you play night after night. Then there is things to discuss. That's how
exactly.
we improve, and that's, well, for me, that is a lot about indeed the agility, and I like that you gave this as an example, because that's exactly what we do with teams. We
Yes,
we want to improve and we want to look, and we shouldn't always I like also that you say we sometimes do a more formal one when we go back to the rehearsal, but on the
Yeah,
evening itself, well, you might be in a bar later or you drive, well, especially with the three of you, if you drive home, I assume you both, all three drive home in the same car. And so there is a natural debriefing kind of way, in very informal.
yeah,
And that happens with teams as well. We sometimes just after a stand-up say, wait a minute, what happened there? Or and then it's not the real informal retrospective, but it might be the most important retrospective, even if it's
right.
not called that way.
Yeah, but that's really cool because too often I'm sure you've seen this too, where teams go, no, 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 that's for the retrospective. We'll do that 2 weeks from now. Now the value's lost and we've lost that thread.
Exactly. I note, well, I have. I'm a big fan of retrospectives, and I think many people know this. But as some of the one of the best teams I've known, they never do retrospectives. Why? Because every day they do like a 5 minute look back and try to
Right.
do retro. So that works really well. They have a risk that they don't look at the big picture because they always look very.
Sure.
So I do know that every 6 months or so they still do a more formal retrospective, but more than that, not because they do it almost on a constant basis. And like you say, they don't wait for 2 weeks. They just do it every day, and every day they try to think, okay, 5 minutes, what can we improve? And yeah, that works really well.
Exactly. Because why wait? If we can improve today, why not?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go to that next question already. If you had not been to IT, and you already talked a little bit about it, that you coach also at executive level, and I see IT broadly. So for me, agile is also somewhere in the IT space. So do you know if you are basically the question is if you wouldn't do what you're doing today, was there a different kind of path for you?
Yeah, that was an interesting question because when I think back, I think I had a lot of the normal kind of ideas of kids, firefighter, policeman. I actually pursued policeman at one point.
Wow.
Yeah. And I can't remember why I decided not to, continue pursuing it. But really where I look back from now, I go, if I really dug into it and understood myself, maybe something like psychologist or therapist, not
Mm.
a physical medical doctor, but something more on the mental health kind of space. I could really see myself have done that kind of thing. And so
Okay.
when I think of policemen, I think the most effective police officers I know, and I know quite a few, they're not psychologists, but they work like you and I do. They work with the person in relationship with that person.
I really like that you bring that up because, well, what I'm hearing in Belgium and in other countries as well is that there's not enough attention in for these kind of jobs to learn about these kind of skills. I don't want to go to the United States where it's even harder, where there's almost no attention to that kind of stuff. It's more
Yes.
like shooting and other things. But even in Belgium, I know that there is some attention, but it's, and like you say, some of the most well, famous is the wrong word, but the most good cops that really achieve a lot of, they can derail problems just like we do it in a different but similar kind of skills. It's yeah, it's really learning how to handle a crowd, if
Yeah.
if it's a large event, how to handle just two people. Sometimes it's the same in a team. Sometimes you feel two people talking and you just know that there could be a fight going on, and it will be probably less violent than a policeman has to deal with. um,
Yeah.
but we sometimes know, okay, we can help out. Sometimes we need to learn also to kind of realize, okay, they can handle it themselves. And sometimes you know that probably for the safety, psychological safety and everything in the team, it might be good to just see, okay, can I help to facilitate that conversation and things like that. So there's a
Yes.
lot of skills that are similar, I would say.
I would
um,
agree, and like hardly surprising, like we're dealing with people, they're dealing with people. We deal with
mhm.
people that are having problems, and um, They might be having a bad day. It might even be the worst day of their career. Okay, police are dealing with people who are having a different kind of bad day, right? But at the end of the
Exactly.
day, it's still the same thing. It's people, right? And all the complexity and all the wonderful stuff that comes with it. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
It's yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about how that yeah, how a lot of that, well, it is about people one way or another, and that well, for me, that is what makes it interesting. I'm still interested. I've helped teams that have totally nothing to do with IT, like people who are in healthcare and others, but I still get drawn every time back to IT because yeah, I'm a geek in yeah, in lots of things. I like to play around with computers. I like to play around with geeky stuff. But it's how would I say, it's the mix of both. It's like, okay, how to help people with
Yeah.
whatever we're doing, and some days it's like, okay, the easy part is the computers, and some days the easy part is the humans. So it's
You never know, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm
and
very
yeah,
similar to you,
go
where
ahead.
I have that geeky side. I don't get into the programming as much anymore, hardly at all anymore. But from the geeky kind of side, yeah, I'm totally into it. But at the end of the day, for me, it always comes back to people. Like
Mhm.
people, it's always the people, no exception, at that kind of level. In technology challenge, oh, why do we have that? Oh, look, because people are accepting something, or like whatever it is that's going on.
I was had an interesting problem today. I don't know. It was with some kind of Kanban system, and they tried to remove, what was it, two user stories, and they just couldn't delete it. I was like, oh, the delete button doesn't work or whatever. No, they couldn't restore. They couldn't restore two things that were deleted, and that the undo button or the restore button doesn't work. And I just had a thing like, oh, wait a minute, just select one of them and not two. And then was like, now it's possible. So somehow a computer programmer decided, let's not allow to restore two items at the same time. And I was
Yep,
like, yeah, this is both the programming and a human, because someone took that decision, that it's conscious or unconscious, because it could be just a bug as well. But somehow
agreed.
someone took that decision to not allow that. And this is where it's interesting, because they were like, ah, god damn it, what's in it? And then somehow my testing and debugging skills kicked in and said, let's try this, and oh, now it's possible. So,
Hmm.
so that's an interesting thing
Great
to see.
example, right? And and how that influences products and outcomes.
Oh yeah, and then it was like it well, if none of us, because I was just the lucky one who found it. Any one of my teammates could have found
Oh,
that
sure.
at that
Yeah.
moment. Um, but if none of us would have thought about that, then we would have had to create something that, yeah, that we would have lost a lot of time. So that
Yeah.
would have created lots of frustration for the tool. Why doesn't the tool allow it? Well, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
and there's probably a lot of reasons why they did implement it that way, if it was a conscious
Yes.
decision, but we don't know. And yeah, but it doesn't matter at that level. And it's a small annoyance. So if it's just for two stories or two items that were there, it's okay. Of course, if you would do it for 20 and you can't do it, then it might get more annoying. But
Hmm.
luckily we don't have to do that that
Agreed.
very often.
Agreed.
Let's move to that third question. What is for you a biggest challenge, and why is it a good thing? And I always add to this, that what's the biggest challenge that you want to talk about? Because of course sometimes people tell me afterwards, well, there was a little bigger thing, but I don't want to talk about it on
Uh,
camera. So I assume you're big enough to decide for yourself what you want to talk about on camera
yeah.
afterwards.
For me, for me personally, my biggest challenge is balancing between my work life and my personal life. And
Hmm.
here's the thing about that is I believe work-life balance, that whole concept, is a scarcity concept. And
Hmm.
as opposed to the abundance side of that kind of spectrum, which is you have all the time you need. The question is, how are you choosing to use it? And so why that's a good thing, like you can make up all kinds of stuff about me personally. And, I like my personal life. I got, I don't know, 5 camping trips booked so far for this summer. Um, right. I like my personal time. I like getting away. In fact, 2 of the weeks, you won't even be able to get a hold of me. I'll have to drive 50 kilometers to get a cellular signal, which is,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, it's perfect.
Well, it's perfect because that's a decision that you take and that you
Yeah,
say, for me, that is important, and it's a decision that is also hardly to reverse, because I might go away and say I don't turn on my phone for 2 weeks, but
yeah,
if for whatever reason I make an excuse for myself, I can still turn it on. If you want
yes,
to make that excuse to talk to the world, you need to drive for 50 kilometers. So that's that's a lot harder to reverse. So it really makes it a lot easier to jump into that offline concept of not talking to the rest of the world.
absolutely, absolutely.
So
So,
that's
so
indeed yeah.
here's the second part: is why is it a good thing? It's a reminder to me, right? And I bring this to my clients, whether they're corporate or individuals that I'm working with, is we all need that kind of time. Whether it's like you, where you just choose to turn it off for a couple days, or you go a little more extreme like me and just make it so you can't just turn it on, right? Like, regardless of how you accomplish it, we all need that time. And we can make up a lot of stories about why it is, we don't have time for it, or I'm going to pay the price when I come back, or my customers won't like me and they won't hire me, being an independent, because I'm doing that. Well, the truth is, in 12, 13 years of being independent, nobody's ever given me a problem when I said I'm disappearing for 2 weeks,
It's
right?
really in ourselves. Huh? I learned that basically in the first years that I became a father, because before doing long hours and whatever, and my partner is working in healthcare, which means that she works in shifts. So sometimes she has the late shift, and so if
Yeah.
she has a late shift, I'm the one that wants to pick up the child, the first child. And then, of course, I had to leave work much earlier than I was used to. And I still remember both the thing like wanting to do it, doing it, and feeling like, will my client like it and won't I like it? And then picking up my bags at that exact moment, and seeing and feeling like, oh, it's actually okay. They don't care about it. Well, they if they care about it, it's like, this is good. This is a good choice. Go pick up your kids.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, it's both powerful, it's learning, and at the same time it's like, okay, yeah, and why did I do not before? And again, it's a choice. So you can choose at some points to do this or that, and
Hmm.
that's what you say. It's a scarcity thing, and we all need to learn it.
Yeah.
And I had a discussion yesterday at the conference with something similar. I think it's sometimes also when you're in a room, in a meeting or whatever, we can pay attention to everything that's happening. But for me, that's impossible. And I cannot just pay attention to everything, because if I do, I will lose a lot of things. And sometimes it's better for me to kind of block out. So I might be sitting in a meeting room, closing my eyes just to just listen, to not have visually input on some things, or
Yes.
I might be focusing on something else. And I've noticed that I'm actually much more, how would I say it? I get better results basically.
Yeah.
Because I focus, and I might focus on something wrong, but somehow a little bit like what you say also with your son marching, and you sending him some kind of signal. At some point you pay attention, and you have certain thing that you focus on, and that helps.
Yeah.
um And it was again something I needed to learn, because in the beginning when I was coaching teams, I had the feeling I have to pay attention to everything. I have to be the scripter, I have to be the facilitator, I have to do the whole animation and whatever. And at some points I realized, oh, I'm actually getting better results if I focus and if I make choices, basically.
I love what you're pointing to, because two things were coming up for me. One is there's times when I'm coaching teams where I consciously choose to step back and
Hmm.
just let them go. Like I don't have to be so connected and in control, and just reconnect with myself. And the other one is when I'm coaching individuals, it's almost always remote work. I actually find a lot of times being on video is limiting. Where if I
Hmm.
take away that sense, my vision part of it, and we just get on the phone together, I find a lot of times we can go a lot deeper.
It's interesting. I had a conversation. Well, the conversation that I put live last week with Dominica de Grandes, she said something similar. Like, for example, when we, and I'll put the link up here. If people, if we go have dinner together, we eat and we don't care about it. But if we're on video, we would not like to be eating, so we will turn off our cameras. And what it turns out is that there's some research that shows, okay, the fact that you see yourself makes it a lot harder. And of course, here we're recording and I see you and I see myself at the same time, because this is how the tool works.
Hmm.
But if I'm coaching, and since I had that video with Dominica, I recognize that I turn off my camera for myself a lot more. So Zoom and Teams, they make it possible to hide my own view. Depending on how it's configured, they might turn it on whenever somebody is changing something. But in general, I try to no longer look at myself, and it's much more relaxing. I just watch the other people, and I don't mind that they see me, but I don't have to look at myself. And that makes it actually much more relaxing for coaching conversations as well as
Agreed.
other kind of things. So
Agreed.
that's yeah, I
Yeah.
recognize a lot what you say there. It's we have the tendency to think, oh, we have the option to do much larger, need more input and whatever, and we think that, oh, that's always better. Well, not always. And I think
No.
people with, for example, autism have a lot of that. They have too much sensory input, and they have a hard time working on it. And for me, working remote, learned a lot about that. About, okay, and even now for physical meetings, I might want to focus on just a few things. That helps a lot.
Totally agree.
So that's
Yeah.
a very interesting insights that you bring on these things. So thank you.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, the last thing you said there, I think is profound, because I wonder how our in-person meetings are going to start to change because of how we've lived for the last 2 years. Sorry, how we've met for the last 2 years.
Well, for me, one thing I've noticed, and I was writing it down this evening, just before we got connected, is that one thing that struck me yesterday at the conference. So this was my first conference, physical conference in 2 years,
Oh,
and
it
one
was
thing that's,
physical.
yeah, it was physical, so that was really, it was both scary and good. So there's multiple things there, but one thing that struck me is that there was much more checking of consent for hugging and giving hands, for example. Before, I would just, everybody that I knew in the audience or people that I've worked.
Yeah,
The interesting part is, if I worked with people, I would not hug people at work, but if I would see them back then 5 years later, I would much more, if I see them back then at a conference or somewhere, I would be much more inclined to hug them, because it was like, oh, this is an old friend seeing back. But it yeah, I didn't always, or all of us, we didn't check enough about consent. And yesterday, that was very clear. Everybody basically said, okay, are you okay with shaking hands already? Are you okay
right.
with hugging? Because, yeah, we're mixing, I don't know, 300 people at the conference that are coming from multiple places, multiple countries. So there is a big
Yes.
risk at this point.
Yes.
I did check. I know that the person with who I did a workshop did check for COVID as well, just to make sure for ourselves. But I have no idea who else at the conference did that or who did not. So there was a lot more checking, and I hope that is something that stays around for, because I know not everybody feels okay with hugging and shaking hands or kissing or whatever.
Yeah.
That are habits in some countries and some companies. So for me, that was a nice way to see this happening. So that's one of the changes I see.
Sounds like a good kind of change. I can't imagine how that wouldn't increase psychological safety in any environment.
Exactly. I think that's something that yeah, and I know that some conferences have been working on that for a while. But yesterday there was no code of conduct about that, or not that I know, but everybody just naturally did it. I did it myself with the first two people I saw. It was like, is it okay to shake hands? Is it okay to hug? And it's like, okay, so that was yeah, it
Hmm.
felt very comfortable. And there were people that I actually didn't see in a long time, but I also felt like for whatever reason, it's no longer okay. And it's probably more because at the end of the conference, it was more like, okay, maybe now I've hugged too many people or shaken too many hands, and maybe it's less healthy to keep doing it, because of course, yeah,
Yes.
after a full day, I might have catched already a lot of virus or other things, and the other people might. So I felt less comfortable in hugging and shaking hands at the
Yeah.
end. And again, it says nothing about these people. It's more like
Yep.
in that moment, I felt like, okay, let's not do this.
It's a
Um,
personal comfort level.
and so there's changes like that definitely that are happening
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
this. I want to go to that next question. Oh no, wait, I'm shifting a lot of questions here.
What drives
Where
you?
is it? Yeah, what drives you? That's the one I was looking for. My tool was so. What I've noticed already in this conversation, I feel a lot of drive. I feel a lot of passion in how you talk. So tell me a little bit. Is there something that you know about yourself what drives
Yeah. Really, the key is people, like the
you?
activating people, because I'll go a little broader than the agile at first, which is um, people are overwhelmed with problems right now. You know, whether or not you buy into them and believe them, that's not my point, right? But we're hearing about climate change and political things and the war in Ukraine and like the list goes on and on. And even right now, like it seems we're heading towards a recession, right? So people are overwhelmed by all of these inputs and they're trying to process them. And some they'll believe and some they won't. Like we all make our own choices around that. But it's the impact that has, both personally and in our professional lives, right? In our work with teams or with our customers, like whatever it is, all of these things have an impact. And if we deny them and we move past them, we're only going to make the problems we as a species have. Um, and so people, I want to activate them. I want to get them excited, not to fix everything, but just to pick something they want to help chip away at.
I really like that, and I also like that you stressed out in the beginning about everything that's happening. It keeps on piling it. It seems that well, I thought in the beginning of 2020, like okay, things might get better, and then all of a sudden there is a pandemic hitting, and then there is this and that's. It's like wow, it just keeps on piling up on top of it. Um, I saw I don't this weekend I saw someone, or actually virtually I heard someone that was really tired, and I said, well, maybe it's okay to what happened to you in this particular case. There's some other personal stuff that happened to this person on top of that, lost
Mhm.
people and very close people. And so it's like maybe yeah, it's okay, it might be okay to feel not that good and to be not at your best game, because life has been shitty for most of us the last 2 years, and for him in particular. and
Yes,
and yeah, that is, we need to how would I say it, acknowledge that.
yes,
um,
Yes. And yet how many times, especially in corporate settings, where it's like, we don't have time for that, we don't have room, which is probably actually more of a sign of, I can't handle your anxiety. Like, that makes me feel bad and I want to avoid it. So we're just going to go past it.
But the question I always have then is, would they say the same thing about if a person has broken his leg, or if I don't know, if a people have whatever, a back problem, or really serious, not just okay, I don't feel well, I can't sit straight, but really like, okay, you have to lie flat for a month or so. Would they still well, I know some corporations where they still try to insist and say, okay, it's been a week now, let's try to come back. But I see that less in corporations for physical pain than for emotional pain.
I agree.
And yeah, that is a problem. And I like that because, well, you say this is about what drives you, that what drives you is indeed helping people. And again, you also had some kind of focus in the sense that it's not about fixing the whole world and it's about fixing everything in people. No, it's about, okay, how can I help someone to make the life a little bit better? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. Starting with them, right? Like, if they can feel better about life, they're more likely to go out, whether it's at work or in the community or in the world in general. They're more likely to go out and do something that's going to make something better.
That's well, yeah, I like that because it's basically it's inspiring people. It's helping people to, and like you say, it's not about helping them as, okay, look, I fixed something for you. No, it's about
No.
kind of showing them, or yeah, inspiring them how they can make their life better. Because
Yes.
that's for me, it's kind of a paying forward, because automatically they will do similar things, or most of them will do
Mhm.
similar things to the people around them. And that is what's that is much better. Or if I look at myself, if I can help a few people to get to improve a little bit part of their life, they can improve other people, and that's much better than if I would have to do the energy for fixing one person. That's
Oh, yeah.
probably about what I could do, and then this person will feel okay, thank you, but still feel helpless and not
Yeah.
helping others, and
Yeah.
that's very limiting. So I like the way you phrase that.
Yeah. The thing I'll add to it is, too often, and I think I see this a lot in the agile community, agile coaching community, is trying to make things perfect, and we don't need to. Like if I help you in some way, and assuming we could measure it, if your life was 10% better, isn't that an improvement?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's
Right?
even just 1% is would make things a lot better, and that's the thing. Especially if you can. I'm a person that sees a lot of things around me that I want to improve, and I talk with Jason Jip about that as well. It's not so much about not being happy about the other state. It's just like I like the improvement, and so to just make things better a little bit, like what you say. And then it's actually much more sustainable if I can do it 1% every day or every week or every month than making
Exactly.
big jumps of 100%. I always have the image of I have a friend who is actually an Olympic weightlifting person, and
Hmm.
I had once a conversation with her, like, okay, if you would start to learn to weightlift, you wouldn't start with 100 kilos. You would start with a very small amount that is just well, just bearable, I would say, and then push it
Yes.
up and do that a few times, and that's how you improve yourself. If you would start with 100 kilos, that you would be frustrated, and the next day you would be frustrated again, and there would be no improvement. There would just be more frustration, and yeah, maybe at some point you might be able to push the 100, but I don't believe it. And I definitely think that if you just put, I don't know, 500 grams or 1 kilo added every day, probably too fast. But if you would do that
Yeah,
and do that for 100 days, you will probably much faster go to the 100 kilos, to put that
I
above you.
agree. I
uh,
agree.
and that's the kind of improvement that I like. And if you would try too quickly, 10 kilos, that was like no. Of course, if you're trained, and then you can sometimes jump a little bit, but even that, it's in smaller jumps, I would say.
I'd agree. Yeah.
That's I like that, in yeah, how you look at these kind of things. I feel very connected on how we look at these different things. So I want to go, because I've just talked about some of these achievements, if it's in weightlifting or something else. What is something that you consider your biggest achievement? Basically, this is the moment for you to brag. Where you want to brag about?
I, of course, would be remiss not to point to my marriage and my boys, but that's not the one I want to talk about. Um, the one
Yeah, I probably need to say to people, like, this is illegal, not to say negative things about the partner, because basically it's the obvious one that we all want to say first.
exactly. Yeah, because you know what? Actually, for me, I'll stick there for a second. When it comes to my family, so both my boys still live at home. One's 30, one's 27. Both are, they're doing their own thing. They're independent and such. But I'm very proud of what we have, right? A marriage of
Mm.
34 years plus two boys, and they still want to be with us. Yeah, did they want to move out the housing market and so on? But what that helps me with is when times get tough, it gives me the foundation.
Mm.
When the pandemic started, all my business dried up overnight and took a little while to come back, but I knew I was fine. Yeah, financially I was fine. That part was good. But I had this thing here, this stability, this foundation, that makes everything okay for me. And I think that's so important for everybody. However we achieve it, you don't got to achieve it like I do, but that you have that foundation to work from.
That stability and whatever, well, it's, even for other people there might be foundation that is less on stability based, but yeah, like you say,
Yeah,
it's interesting.
yeah,
um, and well, and it's I think there's two parts: is having it, and also realizing that you have it, and getting then the calm and the energy or whatever you need from it to yeah,
agreed,
that's
agreed.
that is important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for pointing that out, because I might have just dismissed talking about it, but
Yeah.
it is an important part, I think,
Well,
for
I was going to dismiss it, but all of a sudden it just became more important there. So, from a professional point of view, probably the biggest achievement for me, that jumped out for me, I did some work with one of the C-suites, so one step removed from CEO
Mhm.
in one of Canada's biggest banks, and
Okay. So.
um, the work, I would say it happened because they started to do the agile thing, but they
Mhm.
realized the agile thing was being limited by something, and a coach pointed out to him it was because of their leadership,
Hmm.
and they grabbed onto it, and that's where I entered into the scene. That coach pulled me in and said, Mike, this is more your thing, you go deal with this. And so what makes it so remarkable for me is when I started it, I did some relationship building over several months, doing little things for them, in order for them to get to know me and so on. But there was this underlying conversation that started right from the beginning, which was they lack trust, right? The kind
Hmm.
of trust that allows people to be who they are and so on and so forth. And so there was this underlying thing while we were building a relationship. And then one day, the COO called me in and he says, Hey, Mike, I want to start working on that trust thing. Would you mind coming in and let's talk about what working on it would look like? And I decided on my way in, it was in downtown Toronto, so I had a train ride to get there. And I'm like, what would make me take this? Right? Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to take work if they're going to say, go fix my people. But what would make me take this? And it was, I needed to hear the right words from him, the right essence, the right values, the right whatever. And here's what
Basically, you needed to trust him.
good point. Absolutely. I needed to trust his motives and values that are behind the request aligned with what I believed.
Right.
And that he was going to follow that path, right? Not try to push me in some other kind of path. And so I went in and you know, at that kind of level, as you know, time is scarce for them. But he gave me 90 minutes for this meeting, and we had a great conversation. And I remember at one point I started asking a lot of really powerful coach-like questions, right? And I was really digging into why. Why do you want to do this? Why is this important to you? And at one point, when we, you know, dug and dug and dug and dug, he kind of sits back in his chair and he looks out at King and Bay, which is like the corner for finance in Toronto, and goes, because I want my people to feel that we care about them, that they're valued, that they can come to work and make a difference, whatever exactly his words were, right? Like just the essence of what was there told me, okay, we're working together. And so we did a 6-month leadership program for his team, right? Him and his direct reports. And here's what happened at the beginning of it. They're like, how are we going to change this? We're all siloed and have different objectives and, you know, so on and so forth. By the end
Which
of
is
it,
typical at the sea level. Yeah, they're all. Yeah.
absolutely. And truly, we didn't get rid of the individual objectives. What we did do, and I say we, because they had such a big role in this, because they could have resisted like the work we're doing. But in that 6 months, we totally shifted what was going on, and they were truly a team. They trusted each other. They were having more open discussions. Like Patrick Lencioni refers to it as conflict, not the bad conflict, but they were debating stuff where in the past they would figure out, okay, how do I work around this person? That kind of thing. And it was very inspiring to watch the shift that happened over those 6 months. And so when I look at that, the reason I hold that as one of my greatest achievements is they had 4,000 people working for them in a very large way. Is what difference did that make in the lives of 4,000 people?
Probably a lot. Probably a lot. Yeah, that's. I really like that. There is one thing that I wanted to ask you when you talk about trust. Um, I fully I do know Lencioni and a lot there starts with trust. But when you talk about trust, this is talking about trust in a team, and then I'm reminded about who's it? Amy Edmondson, who talks in the Fearless Organization. She talks about psychological safety, and she makes a difference in her book between trust and psychological safety. Where for her, she says trust is on a personal level, of people to people, and psychological safety is more at group level or at team level. So I wonder, is there how do you see that in this team? Is this really about trust? Is it about psychological safety? Is it the same for you? How do you, yeah.
Yeah, I don't draw a big difference between the two things. And they are different, but I think they're very interrelated to each other. So something I got from not from Christopher Avery, but his mentor, Bill McCarley, who's also my mentor,
Okay.
is we had this really deep discussion on trust about a month ago in a part of that community. And what Bill described is trust really comes down to one thing, is are the agreements, are the commitments that we're making being met? And he actually had a post-it and he held it up, and I have one on my monitor now as a reminder, is when somebody makes a commitment, whether it's me or you or somebody else, and they say yes, do they really mean yes? Or do they mean yes, comma, unless? Right? And it's not a bad intention thing or a malicious thing, right? But if they don't live up to the commitment they made to me, then I go, well, see, I can't trust them.
I like that. Yeah, it's if I look at every, every is maybe exaggerated, but if I look at most of the discussions and the arguments I have with people, if it's either my partner, my children, people at work, it's in my case almost always about a yes and a thing like,
Yes.
well, you said yes, and there is a, well, it's a yes maybe, and more, that is actually more a no. Yes, I will do this. And then there is something else that typically people forget to say. And I say people because it could just be me that I say yes, and I forget that there might be something else, and that creates frustration almost every
Absolutely.
time. And
Absolutely.
it brings it back to the discussion in the beginning when you say, okay, about that work-life balance. It's really about what is a 100% yes for my family, 100% yes for work, and where is it again in balance. And this is where the time is a scarcity, that yeah, you cannot do
Absolutely.
two things at the same time. Well, if they're independent, we can. I like to go back a little bit to that conversation. I like to join things. I like to fuse things. So if I, like I said earlier, if I can do work with my children or with my partner, it's again, it's an and. But in many cases, that well, if I'm recording this here, I'm not talking to my partner. I'm not talking to my
Correct.
children. So I have, well, you have my full attention, um, and nobody else has my attention at this point, because I cannot do this. I cannot have talk to you and at the same time help someone behind my back, for example. That's just not possible.
Yes.
And that's the trust that you're talking about. It's the yes is a fully yes. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing.
Like, I'm fully committed. I'm going to live up to the agreement that you and I just made. And here's the thing. Here's what complicates it is if you say yes to me, let me go to a small story, which is going back quite a few years. I was working with someone, and I had this meeting, and I really needed that person there. And it's like, okay, so we're going to start the meeting at 1:00. Can you be there? Yes, I can be there at 1. And then we come to the day the meeting's happening, got the whole team there, whatever it is we're doing, and the person doesn't show up to 1:10. Right? I'm making up the numbers a bit, but it'll make the point. And I'm like, right, he didn't live up to the commitment. So now I got this element, like, it's now in me going, I'm not sure I can trust him. And so we go forward and we do it again, and we do it again. Right? The whole time when he's saying yes, he's really saying yes and less, or yes and, right? And and it wasn't until the point that I confronted the fact that I was getting upset at him, but I never once talked to him about the commitment he's making. Right? To say, hey, every time I say, can you be there at 1:00, you show up late. Right? Can we talk about that? Turns out the person had a very valid reason, was on the personal side of life. It's when meetings generally conflicted with personal time. He just couldn't do it. Right?
But he couldn't also say no to you. And
Correct. And that's where, whether you want to call it trust or psychological safety, he didn't feel safe enough to say no to me. I can't be there at 1. I will be there as soon as I can.
it's an interesting part, and sometimes it's also miscommunication. It's I had scheduled. I'll and won't share the name to not embarrass myself even more. But I had scheduled a conversation like this with another person, and the meeting is scheduled, and I'm there, and the person is not there. and I get annoyed because, yeah, 5, 10 minutes and whatever. But later on, it turns out that for whatever reason, my screen was resized, and actually that person was there, was looking at me, could see me, but I couldn't see this person because the way the melon works is I have to put people back. So the reason why they work like this, the software works like this, is that people, if I have a large conference way of doing, people can just show up, speakers at any time. I see them and I can bring them on screen at that moment, and they can hear me, they
Ah,
can see me, but they cannot talk. It's, for me, it's a little bit annoying about the software that there is some warning signs, but if that bar on the left is too much resized, I cannot see them. And I didn't know that. And so I get annoyed and I'm like, oh, this person isn't there. And it turns out that the mistake was on my side. Because that person sent me a screenshot of me trying to reach out to me, sending me even. This is the problem with remote work, is that I don't have a phone number of this person. Like, I don't have a phone. I
ah,
don't think I have a phone of you. So basically, we only have email. But just like now, my email is turned off, my email client is turned off, because I want to
me too.
focus on this conversation. I don't want to have something popping up. So if at that point this person was trying to email me for 10 minutes, and like I wasn't there, or I was there but I couldn't hear this person, and so yeah, there was. And that conversation, we didn't re-record it yet, it's scheduled, but I feel already really embarrassed about not having that, yeah, not seeing that. And it's definitely, for me, it's, there is a lack of trust there that needs to be rebuilt, because
Yes.
we lost both time,
Yeah.
and I don't care anymore about the lost time, because I know the problem was on my side.
Yeah.
And yeah, because it's a person that I trust. Well, it's a person I admire, that for me is really, really important. And that was really like, I was looking
Mm.
forward to the recording, and then it didn't happen for me. But it's also a person that I haven't seen in a really long time, that we only have since, I think, 5 or 7 years. I don't know anymore. It's all remote conversation over email or Twitter, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's really like, okay, I need to find ways to rebuild that, and hopefully when we can record next time, there won't be anything going wrong, and then we can rebuild some
Fingers
of that.
crossed.
Exactly, and but
Yeah.
that's why I'm sharing that story, because
Yeah.
I've been so much on the other side, where a
Yeah.
person is not showing up, and I was almost automatically thrown into that place. I was also mad at myself. Why don't I have other ways to contact people? Um, but afterwards, I realized, I really tried it out with my daughter. How does it work? When what could happen? And then that's when I figured out, oh, I really couldn't see this person, because my
Yeah.
daughter just called me from her room. Dad, I'm there. I see you. And I was like, no, you're not there. Oh, wait a minute. And yeah. So
Learning moment.
exactly. But it's
Yeah.
easier, of course, if you're both in the same house, and you can debug it,
Yeah.
and I can run over to her computer, see what she sees and see what
Yeah.
I see. And so yeah, then it's learning. And
Yeah.
I
But
think that brings a lot about the trust part, is that what
yes.
are the acceptance criteria? What is do we have ways to double check on what side it is? And
Yeah.
because a lot of the trust issues that I talked about earlier before with friends and people, it's like, okay, how did I validate what that the yes was really
Exactly.
yes, and did I tell it? I remember an old friend that I no longer have any contact with, but if I look back on how things went, well, away is maybe bad, but there was some trust issues. But if I look back now, I definitely can see part for me where I didn't check enough, or I didn't tell quickly enough, like, oh, wait a minute, I don't like when you behave like that.
Yes.
um, and okay, that behavior was still wrong, or I still convinced that the behavior was wrong on his side, but I didn't tell stop. For me, in a way that I would do today.
I would agree.
So then, yeah, there is trust, but that's
Yeah.
again psychological safety and everything.
Yes.
Safe, can we say it? What is possible? And it's very well possible that I would still have that same broken relationship now, that we agree to disagree, or we agree to no longer be friends. But
Yeah.
it could have been different, and there's no way to know that.
I agree. Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to that next question. And you kind of talked already a little bit about it, because when you talked about well, the different ways on how you are with time and everything. So what I've noticed when I created, well, originally this was a book series, and what I've noticed afterwards, talking with a lot of people, is that basically all agilists have ways how we improve our own life and how we do things. So I'm kind of looking for, what is a tip, what is something that you do that you think is valuable for other
Yeah.
people.
Um, it comes down to one word: experiment. So everything
Mm.
I do in business, everything I do in life and such, I've come to view it as everything as being an experiment. And what I mean by that is, when an idea comes along, and I have a business mentor who has creativity off the charts, and when he comes up with an idea, assuming I grab onto it, I view it as an experiment, not a path to follow. Um,
Mm.
and it serves me in two ways. One of them is the normal experiment kind of thing, which is, if it's an experiment, then you should be readily willing to let it go if it's not working. But the
Okay.
other part of it for me is, um, I was going to say it's a reminder, but it 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 allows me to keep bringing space into my life. In other words, that I'm not digging in and trying to make something perfect. But I'm just trying something, and it might be imperfect. It might be the starting of something, as opposed to spending hours and hours, days, weekends, nights, and everything trying to get something perfect. It's like, no, I'm doing an experiment. So let's just write something up, throw it out, and see what happens. And some work, some don't.
Exactly. And I like the way you did, because indeed I see a lot of people, I think most of us at some point in our life, when we think about things, we want things to be perfect before we dare to show it to friends, family, whatever.
Hmm.
And if I look back at a lot of these things now, it's like, no, I would have been so much, well, a lot less stress, and I would have achieved much more if I would just dare to throw stuff out.
Yes.
That is, and for me, this video is a kind of example of this. I know we can edit this, and I know we can work a lot of that, and many things that might be more interesting. But I also don't want to spend that time, not because I don't care, but also because I think there's a lot of value in the imperfections. There is a lot of
Yes.
value in having real authentic conversation, and that people see, okay, it might be a little bit shaky, it might be whatever, but this is two people talking to each other and learning, and sometimes there are some of these videos where I ask a question and a person takes about 1 minute to really think, because this person forgot about that question
Mm.
and thought, oh, I really want to think a little bit. And for me, it's like, okay, we take the time, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can leave that in, because it feels like, okay, this is what we need. Um, and that is good. What I want to ask is, when you talk about experiment, you say, I want to let go when it doesn't work. How do you know? Do you do metrics? Do you do some kind of scientific way for this
Some
experiment, or?
sometimes, like, if we're talking about blogging, like I put a blog post out on Sunday, and then there's a daily thought kind of thing that comes out. So 6 days a week, something's coming out for me. I converted that 3 months ago. What I was doing before that is I was doing kind of a pocket-sized blog post, Seth Godin-sized blog post every weekday. And I converted it And when I did, what I did was to start looking at the metrics and see how people are responding to it. And metrics are kind of funny, right? Because they can be a vanity kind of thing. Oh, look, it's really climbing, and and we can get kind of obsessed with them. But I look at it and see, okay, where are they going long term? And in this case, they've gone up quite significantly. And I'm waiting for the drop to happen. They always do happen. But I do look at metrics like that, but I just look at it as input and indication as opposed to validation. Might be the way to think about it.
I
The
like
other,
that because, yeah, a lot of the things, like you say, blogs and everything, it's like it's
yeah,
tempting to look at numbers just as numbers, and yeah,
I
it's
agree.
more, the trend is more interesting than the sea. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
thing. We are not our number of followers or the number of people that listening to
no,
whatever. Not even the number on our bank account. It's
no,
it's really
I
not
agree.
not.
I agree. What actually matters more to me is the interactions that happen. And I'm not talking about somebody clicking a like button. That's nice, right? But it's people who comment, or people who send me emails, or prospective clients that call. Ultimately, I'm in this to attract more clients. Um, but it's those kinds of things, the real direct human connection. Go back to the previous question where it's like, what drives me? People. And so if I get real human connection, that's what matters way more to me.
I like that because for me, this is the same thing. Like, well, this video series, like I said earlier, it's about connecting with people, learning about new people, making friends all around the world, reconnecting with friends. I took the decision this year to not go to conferences abroad. So, like I said, I just went to one, but that's in
Yeah.
Belgium.
Yeah.
It's a very conscious decision to not go to other countries this year, but I spend my time talking to friends all around the world. It's hard because I have also, on the 200 people that are on my list, there's like, I don't know, probably 20 people from Belgium, and I haven't interviewed one of them because for me it's like there's much more desire to talk to the people abroad, and I've probably, from the 20, I don't know, 5 or 10 were there yesterday, and I talked to them. So there's less desire to do that, because it's about connecting with people and having it.
Yeah.
Um, and there's not much discussions going on right now and in the comments, but this is also what's interesting me. It's almost every time that when we recorded something, that people afterwards tell me, like, oh, that was an interesting conversation. I would be really interested to know if other people have that same thing, if they think about whatever you, well, we have a lot of people here, a lot of agilists are musicians as well, so it
Yes.
might be interesting in the story that you tell to hear people in the comments like, yes, I'm playing as well, or I recognize that kind of messaging in another sport or whatever. That's the kind of
I
thing what
agree.
interests me.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things that is where I do these conversations for, learning about new people and making connections and seeing. It's not the first time that I have a friend sending me a link to one of my videos saying what that person says there, that I feel the exact same thing. And this is so good that we've recorded this, because now I can use this, and I can actually explain, or this video explains better what my problem is or how I deal with something. So I'm sending this to my partner, to my children, to whatever, and that's like, wow, that's really the kind of interaction that is interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree. And, I think the conferences and workshops, even workshops, well, especially if I'm leading, um, but in the workplace, like all of it, you're describing what I want everywhere. Okay, I'm the guy at the front of the room. I'm thinking a workshop. I'm the guy at the front of the room. I have some knowledge, like responsibility process, and I'm going to teach it. However, what I know is you all have experience and knowledge too. And I know, just kind of like you're describing with this video, I'm going to learn from you as much as you're going to learn from me. And like every time I teach, I grow. Every time I do something like this, even if I'm the one leading it, I grow. It's everywhere.
Well, I would even say differently or stronger that the reason why I teach is to learn. Um, I send out an email today about the books that I'm reading, and I know that if I want to learn most out of a book, I need to create a workshop around it so that I can discuss it and I can do something with it. And then based on the question, because I don't consider myself a very smart person, but I like to work with people who are smarter. I like to read books about people that are way smarter than me. And then I create a workshop around it. And then all these
Yeah.
other people ask questions that I never even thought about. And then I need to think. And sometimes together we find a solution. Sometimes I ask the author about what this is and how do you solve it. And then I learn so much. So this is for me the best way to learn. Because reading a book, especially when people are so much smarter than me, it's like, yeah, that's true. But there is always the edge cases that are much more interesting, and then it's interesting to create a workshop around it. And like you say, we learn as facilitators way more about from the group than they learn from us, and they learn from each other much more than they learn from us. Or at
I
least that's for me when I'm doing a good facilitation. There might be moments that my ego takes over and I want to talk too much, but that's probably not the moment that they learn most.
I think we all do that at some point, and
Well,
I totally agree with what you're saying.
it's well, there is a reason why we're on front as well. There is definitely also the ego part there.
Yeah.
Let's move to that other part about learning. I don't know if you said that you had some trouble losing work at COVID hit, so I assume that you didn't have that much experience with remote working. Is that a correct assumption at that
No,
time,
that
or?
that happened to me more about the networking side of it,
All
right?
right. Okay. So it was.
And maybe it is actually, because most of my work before that was in person. Most of my
Mhm.
networking was in person, whether it's a conference or a coffee shop or whatever. But what I've learned has, I would say it's in how my assumptions about what it means to work effectively together. Actually, let me change that a bit. To be in
Mhm.
relationship with each other, how my
Oh.
perspective of that has changed, right? Because previously, I was an advocate, not a diehard advocate, for teams need to either be all together or all remote,
Mm.
or the most effective collaboration happens when we're in person. Um, I never once um, advocated strongly for those things, but that's what I believed. And now I look at it and I go, like, a lot of things have changed for me. Like, go ahead and prove to me that we cannot work effectively in whether it's hybrid or fully remote. We've proven we can, right? Over and over again. I think there's some challenges ahead. If you got the hybrid kind of idea, some people in the office, some people remote, because you have to level that playing field between those two.
I like that you bring that up because for me if you just look at remote, um, my first remote team was 2004, and I remember basically everybody in the agile world, well, except maybe for Jutta Eckstein, but everybody else was saying, "Don't do remote; it doesn't work." And I was really struggling at that time. Now we've learned. This is almost 20 years later. The tools are so much better. We learned. There are companies all around the world that have been doing this for 10 years, so there is a lot of knowledge about purely remote work. Hybrid, on the other hand, if you ask people, basically the current best answer is don't do hybrid meetings because it doesn't work. And I agree and disagree in the sense that I agree that right now we haven't figured it out how to make it really
Agree.
work as effectively, but I
Yes.
disagree that it's not possible. It's just that we haven't figured it out. And I think give us 5, maybe 10, maybe 20 years, and we'll have other solutions that we don't see. Maybe technical, probably a lot more facilitation, and a lot
Yes.
of other things. And for me, that this is what is a big future for facilitators. It's like, okay, how do we deal with that? Because in reality, we will have hybrid teams, because even people going back to the office full time, everybody in the office, it's not going to happen.
No, I agree. Yeah. And I think, yeah, there's some technology parts to it, and there's simply got to take time, right? Till we get to the point that the technology catches up and helps support that. Um, I think there's things that can happen more short term, and it starts with some awareness with leaders. Like there's a lot of discussion about people who don't come into the office. There's going to be a proximity bias that means the remote people are less likely to get promoted or raises or whatever. Well, don't make that the remote person's problem. It's the bias that's creating that. So, as leaders, as organizations, I think the ones that are going to thrive will pay attention to that bias and go, okay, how do we deal with this? Won't be
Well, and
easy.
it's already happening, because in the sense that who are the people who prefer to go to the office? In a lot of cases, these are the extroverts, and these are already the people that are easily
Yeah,
getting promoted. So that bias is already happening in the office.
great.
It's okay. As an introvert, you already have options to get promoted, but I see a lot more extroverts getting promoted than introverts, and it might be parts because introverts don't like it always, and then it's fine. But there is definitely a part where they are smart, they are good enough, and they are the best for the job, and they don't get promoted. And
Yes,
indeed, if they're then at home less visible, and we need to solve that part of the puzzle as well. That's definitely something
agreed.
that needs to happen there.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah,
and for me, that is where remote also, well, if a remote meeting is good facilitators, actually for me, introverts get a better seat at the table than they had in the office.
I would agree. I would agree.
So
Yeah,
yeah, there is that is one of the advantages that are there. But we need to have it good facilitated, and that might be another part of that problem.
yes.
Okay, I want to go because we're already a little bit adding a lot of things. What are books that you want to talk about? Because I know that you send me a full list of lots of books, so
No.
let's pick a few of them.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll start with Creativity Inc. And uh, Creativity Inc. is it's the story of Pixar. For
that's
those
this
that,
one, eh?
yes, yes, it's the story of Pixar. And what I really loved about it, kind of two things. One is it's a kind of book that I could geek out a little bit, and it drew me forward. Right, like
True.
he gave the inside picture of what happened, not just with Pixar, but the relationship with Disney and Steve Jobs. And, so it was kind of cool in that sense. But more importantly, it gave me a whole bunch of really creative ideas that I think can be applied in a lot of places. The biggest one being what they called the brain trust, right? The
Hmm.
ability to go into a room with a whole bunch of people from different levels, level playing field. Let's just say it like it is. And that's how they iterated on movies.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine in Belgium, Jan de Baere, that did a workshop on that on XP days multiple times, and for me it was like, wow, okay, that was really like, okay, we played around with very, of course it's a conference session, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours, something like that, so you get a very small ID, so you don't have enough time. But it was something similar. You create something. Some people did think about a movie plot. Some things people thought about something else, and then he played really like the way it's explained in the book. And it triggered me to read the book because I loved the concept so much about, okay, let's then bring people, okay, let's give feedback. And I don't remember the details anymore, but it was a lot similar as how it's explained in the book.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's something I've done. Well, I need to look back again because it's been, I don't know, this book is what, it's 10 years old, I don't remember. it's
Yeah,
it's
roughly.
it's already a few years old. So I haven't used the techniques in a while, so it's a good reminder for me about these techniques, because it's really good about creating feedback from different kind of angles. And but you need, like we discussed before, you need psychological safety. Well, it's a way to bring in that safety, but you need to understand how the dynamic is, because
Agreed.
it's like, okay, in this part, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to shut down, we're going to give, we shoot from different sides, both positive, negative, all kind of ways on how to do it. But it's, yeah,
Yes.
you need to be ready for this kind of feedback session. That's what
I,
I would
I
say.
would agree. Yeah, it has to be safe. You have to be ready. You have to be open. Absolutely.
But yeah, Pixar was all about that. That was the way it's created. It's wonderful.
That's why they did what they did. So yeah. The second book I'll mention is one called The 9 Lies About Work.
Let's see
And
if I can bring
I
that
think you
one
have it
up.
there.
Yes,
Yeah,
9 Lives About Work.
yeah. I first a customer, a corporate customer, one of the people there actually gave me a copy of the book, and she said, "You need to read this." And
These
I
are the
did.
interesting ones. When a client tells you like, this is one you're going to like, and this is one that needs you. This it's almost always like, okay, this is now getting on top of my stack.
Exactly. Yeah, and even to the point she hands me a copy, right? So, which is cool. Go ahead, give me a book. Fine. But it changed my thinking on a lot of things. And one example is they talk about um, um, is leadership a thing? I mentioned that earlier. Is leadership a thing? And they actually point to that being a lie, because we point to a lot of things and say, here's what it means to be a leader. You know how to motivate people, you know how to inspire them, you have executive presence, there's 1,000 things we could put into that list. And the truth is that's not what defines leadership. What defines leadership is the fact people follow something. And what they follow
Mm.
is your intent, your essence, and um, your values. And one of the examples he used is Martin Luther King. Nobody followed him because he took some leadership course and learned, here's the 6 skills to be a good leader. They follow them because of I think they refer to it as the spark that was coming out of him. Right? They follow sparks. They follow that kind of thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of the leadership skills, yes, we need to learn them. We need to be good at them. But it has me questioning, so what really is leadership? Right? There's other ones like one of the lies is people care about what company they work for. My words might be a bit off. The truth is they care about what team they work with. It's the idea of people don't quit jobs, they quit managers.
And yes, it's the teams that make a difference. And yeah, that is a really interesting concept. The leadership, the way you explained it also reminds me of, I forgot the person who wrote it, but who has a TED talk about the first follower makes a lunatic into a leader.
Yes.
And that's a phrase that I like really much. Yeah, indeed, you might have every grand idea, but if nobody follows you, you're basically a lunatic. And the opposite is true as well. And he shows a little clip of a guy dancing at a festival. And it's like, yeah, but
Oh, I
it's a
love
spark
that.
that was like, it's a spark, it's a person doing some crazy stuff, and then and there's one person, and that and I like that concept so much about a first follower, because if I look at myself, or I don't intend to invent anything in agility and whatever, but I like to look and find sparks of other people and say, okay, this is one a person I want to follow and I want to learn from, and then give it to other people. And that's for me is it took that video to realize, oh, that's also kind of leadership. This is not about wanting to invent and whatever. It's like, no, it's about spotting other interesting things and sharing it. It's also kind of way of leading in a way, where we usually don't talk about in all these courses, because somehow people think we need to find that grand new idea and then whatever. And when I originally created this series in a blog post, the question, what are you most proud of, that Jerry Weinberg answered, he said, I'm most proud that I didn't invent the methodology. And it took me a while to think about it. It's like, wow, this is really profound, because he wrote so many books. He's so smart. He
I
had so
know.
many things. He could have easily, probably, if he would have invented whatever kind of methodology for doing software, he would have probably, yeah, made it easy to spread because so many people follow him. And but I like the idea. It's like, okay, I just pick on some of these things. I bring my smartness into the world, but I'm not going to create some grand thing to force people, because that's what it usually is ends up with. You might not want to intend to do that, but that's usually how it's ended up with these kind of methodologies. So I found it a very smart answer.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It surprised me, and it took me a while to think about it. But yeah, that's like you say, it's brilliant. Um, Okay, I want to go to that next question, and I'm looking a little bit. The one that actually, for me, is also one of the most inspiring. Is it, what is a question that I didn't think of, but that you really think I should ask you? And of course, what's the answer?
Yeah, of course. The one that came up for me right away is what's next for agile, right?
Hmm.
Um, in this the small background of my thinking there is, I've been in the agile space for 15 years now, and I've seen a lot of change in that time. And to use the chasm metaphor, like we crossed a chasm a long, long time ago. And there's a lot of monetization, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of maybe not so good. I don't want to be critical, I'm sure it's working for someone. And so the answer to that, like what's next for agile for me, is that we come to a point where we get back to more grassroots and we realize it's about people doing great things together. And while certifications and methodologies and all that kind of stuff add some value, it's not what it's all about. And we get more back to that grassroots kind of thing. It's about the people.
And this is a nice way of, well, linking back to a lot of what we talked about in this
Yes.
conversation. Um, I, for me, one of the interesting things is that when I originally created the series, when I asked that last question, people went all over the place. So really, there was a lot of different questions. What I've noticed now in this video series, it's almost always about something about the future of agile, something about
Mhm.
what's next for me, something. So there is somehow, I think, some unity in a lot of people in the agile world, that we need to think about what's the next phase. And I don't think, like some other people think, that agile is dead, but I do think that indeed we need to, like you say, we need to focus a little back on some things. And I really like your answer. Well, I like a lot of the different answers, but it's really good. And I've been already thinking about, maybe I should just group all these different answers about what's next, because there's a lot of next ideas for agile that all makes kind of sense.
Hmm.
And yeah, the fact that a lot of people ask this question, it feels like this is really important for us, both as a community, but just as people, because again, this is about people. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah. And I think if we don't ask that question, and we don't, even if we can't truly answer it, if we don't seek it, the community will just go flat. We'll go through the motions. And I'm like you. I don't
mm,
believe agile is dead. Do I believe we're in a flat space right now? Yeah. But we need to always be asking what's next? Like, where do we take this? What's going to help us go to a new place? And just for me, it's people.
and well, it brings me also back to your story about the sea level that you worked with. Is that at some point this company decided, oh, they realized that, oh, we need to work on our level, and then there was a coach smart enough and daring enough to say, well, maybe it's you. Well, probably said it in different words, but it was about, okay, it's at that level, it's people level again, and then brings
Agree.
you in. And that's, well, again, it's about people, it's about looking at these kind of levels. And we need to look at that if we want to get results. And I think I see this in a lot of companies, and sometimes C levels, because I just well, the workshop I did yesterday was with a friend who coached a lot at C level at the current company I'm working with, and had some successes, had some fallbacks. So that's always a risk, of course. But I see a
Yeah,
lot C level people realizing that, oh, okay, so it's about us as well. We need to change. Not every company, not every C level person is ready for that.
agreed.
But that was the same thing with Teams 20 years ago. Not all developers were ready to do pairing or to work in an XP way or whatever. And some of them have adapted today, and others haven't, and they might be working in different kind of companies or whatever. And so yeah, it's again, it's about people, and differences are also okay. There
Yeah,
might be that this company is not ready for agile, and maybe agile is not the solution for them. That's it's well, sometimes I think it's saddened, but of course it's what these people want who are there, and they might find a different way.
agreed.
Just like agile was a different way for a lot of us 10, 20, depending on when we started years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up, because it's, yeah, I think, well, the whole conversation, the whole time that we talked, people were really important on this. And that brings me almost automatically to that next question, is that what person or who should I invite next?
For me, it was an easy answer of I think you should invite Cheesy. Do you know Cheesy? Jeff
I have
Morgan?
not. No, I don't.
Yeah.
So
So Cheesy, I've known Cheesy for I'm gonna say probably close to 10 years now.
mhm.
Um, and he used to be down in the US. Now he lives in Toronto, and with his wife Ardita. And the two of them are the leaders of IL Canada.
I know Ardita, so yeah,
Her
and
husband.
then in part, I had no idea that it was her
Yeah,
husband.
maybe it's even this time you interview two people, perhaps. But
I've been interviewed Michael Sahota and Audrey, so it was a very interesting conversation to do it with both of them. So yeah, that might be actually a
bring both
very
of them in.
very good idea to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, Cheesy's one of the very few people um, who, over the years, going to conferences, I've attended some of his technical workshops, technical talks. And he's one of the very few people who's explained things that I went, oh, I get that, right? Like he just has a way to connect with people and explain things. And I just think the way he looks at the whole thing, agile and companies and people and teams and product and technology, he's way more into that than I am. I just think it's very powerful. Like we need more of it.
I like that. I know a few people like that, and I have a tendency, probably just like you, to like these people because it's like, okay, for me, the person I think of first when I think about that skill is Liz Keogh. That for me, when she explains something, she in lots of cases is better able to explain something than the person who invented it. It's like
Hmm.
she knows to grasp something, to understand something, and then find the right words that work for me and for I think a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really get drawn to that kind of how would I call it, intelligence. It's basically
Yes.
some kind of intelligence, like
Yes.
understanding a concept, grabbing, probably understanding it very quickly, but if not, doing the research to understand it fully and then explain it in really clear sentences, really for me, because I'm non-native English speaker, so that is important that it's English that I understand very very easily.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she's done that, and there's a few other people, and so I'm really looking forward to if I can meet another person like that. And Ardita, yes, I've been invited to some of the things that she's done online the last 2 years. So I'm a big fan as well. So it
Oh
might
yeah.
be a good idea to try to do that together for both of
Yeah.
them. So it's
Awesome.
great. Now I have that I'm really looking forward. But yeah, I basically look forward to all these conversations. Um, and like we well, like I said, this is typically taking about an hour and a half. I think we went over that time,
Yeah.
but it was for me again very interesting conversation. So Mike, if people want to get to know you, what's the best way to contact you?
I'll give them two ways. One is they go to my website, leading for FOR
Is that this
change.ca. There
one?
it is. Yes, thank you. Go to Leading for Change. You can sign up for my newsletter and my blog posts, or you can just contact me through there. The other one is to go to LinkedIn and look for Mike Edwards, and there it
I,
is.
I I guessed it or I hoped it. This is well. This is one of the. Usually I ask that upfront to people, but I completely forgot. So this is what 10 minutes before we started talking, I
Good
added
guess.
quickly, and I forgot to ask you when before we started recording, but I guessed correct. So that's nice.
You
But
nailed
yeah,
it.
it's a good way for people to contact you.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your time because it was, for me again, a very lovely conversation. I don't think, well, I have to look back, but I don't think we had any technical issues, which is also very nice.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. So thank you very much, Mike, and I hope we get, well, like we discussed about live events. It won't be for me this year, but once I go back to events, I love the Toronto scene. I've been at Agile Toronto well, lots of years ago, but I
Yes.
would love to go back once so then we can meet in person some
Yeah,
other
and I'm
day.
looking at European stuff too. Again, like you, not this year, but looking forward to coming that way again. So who knows?
Okay, well, until then,
Thank
bye
you for
bye.
watching Who's Agile, where the stories of Agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other Agilists.